Tired of hearing about these motherfuckers.
It's time to go. All I want to do is fucking eat.
We're not practicing to beat somebody. We're practicing to beat everybody.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. If you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness is what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I do to the guy across from me. I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box. Not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Now I am going to kick shit out of them. Physically, I want to break them.
Oh, everybody, welcome back in. I cannot believe it. I know it's December, but Christmas is coming early if you're an SEC fan tonight. In case you didn't know, tonight, here in just a few minutes, is going to be the big SEC schedule release where we're going to find out not only which teams are playing who, we're going to find out where, and we're going to find out what day, we're going to find out what time. So there's a lot of good stuff going on this edition of How About That Dogs Cast. Now, there's a lot. I'm going to do my best to keep up with it. This is a one-man gang here. Y'all probably have it up on your screen too. If I'm not, your only monitor here. But they're going to be releasing the schedules for all the teams. And of course, on this channel, we're going to pay attention mostly to what's going on with the University of Georgia. But we are going to do our best to stay on top of everything else if we see something out there that is very interesting, and that'll probably come at the back half. Because like I said, off the top, we're really going to focus on what's going on with the Bulldogs. Now, there's a lot that's happening this week in Georgia land. Like you've got, I called it whirlwind season last week. You've got the end of the regular season and the championship games. The Final Four for the college football playoff has been determined. And then immediately we fall right into recruiting for this year's signing class, and the transfer portal is popping off. And here's my opinion about all of that and everything that we've seen so far. There are a lot of people out there that are concerned about what's going on with the University of Georgia right now. Do not count me among them. This is not something that should be unexpected if you're a Georgia Bulldog fan in any way. There's been news about potential flips, both to Georgia and away. There has been big news in the transfer portal about who's choosing to stay and who's choosing to go. Unless you're brand new here, you know that my position hasn't changed. I have absolute faith in Kirby Smart and his staff to handle the roster management at the University of Georgia right now. I do not envy their job. It makes me really not think twice about my chosen profession, because it doesn't matter how much these people are getting paid to manage this kind of stuff. It is insanity, especially, which most of them don't, if you are paying attention to anything outside of what's happening inside the building and the conversations you're having with people who are actually in the know and who know what's going on. If you listen to anything outside of that, it becomes almost unbearable. I've seen people who are threatening to cancel subscriptions to the Georgia Pay sites this week simply because they cannot handle all the craziness that comes from Dog Nation. So I know that there's a lot of people out there that are really feeling a little edgy this week. All I'm going to say to you is fear not. Fear not. So we know about this schedule that's coming up. We know a couple of the games. It's already been leaked for Georgia, but there are a few marquee matchups along the way for the Dogs. Of course, there's the Alabama game where the Dogs are going to have to go back on the road to face the Crimson Tide. And there's the trip to Austin. And needless to say, Austin's going to be a busy weekend that weekend. I think there's like a Grand Prix race that's in Austin that weekend as well. Some of the Dog fans are fired up about it because they're going to get a twofer. They're going to hit the Grand Prix race and do the game. More power to you. But anyway, you slice it, this is going to be a very, very interesting season coming up in 2024. And there are so many moving pieces, so many moving parts. We don't even know who's going to be on the roster, who's going to be taking snaps for Georgia. We don't know what our defense is going to look like at this point. There are so many reasons to be excited about what's about to happen. All I can tell you is trust the process, trust our head coach, hang in there and enjoy the ride. Don't let it weigh you down. Now, they're talking about this on screen right now, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it up here so we can discuss it. And that is that the Georgia-Alabama game, it falls on September 28th, which means that the Dogs are going to be coming off of a bye heading into that game. And if I had to bet money, I would say that Alabama will be too. But the news that broke this morning was that this game is not only a road game for Georgia. We learned that already. What we learned today was that it's going to be a night game, a prime time game in Tuscaloosa. Now, depending on where you sit, that's going to have that's going to hit you a different way, right? If you're a Georgia fan, and especially if you are a paranoid Georgia fan, you're thinking, oh, they're stacking the decks against the Dogs again. They can't catch a break. Not only do they have to travel back to Tuscaloosa after going there in 2020, but they also now have given Alabama a night game. And we all know that in the SEC, night games are a big advantage. Maybe not on the recruiting front, depending on which coach you ask, but as far as the game and the game day environment and everything else that goes on around the event, let's just say that Tuscaloosa will not be a wine and cheese crowd that night. If the Dogs are going to go on the road and get the win at Tuscaloosa in 24, they're going to earn it. I think that's the easiest thing you can say about that game. The most obvious thing, because like we said, it's one of those situations where we don't even know who's on the roster right now. Of course, Alabama does neither, but that's just the way it is. So I'm looking forward to the trip. I'm looking forward to the Dogs going on the road and playing a big SEC game because I enjoy the games. So I am going to choose yes. That's how I'm approaching this entire 2024 season. I am, and this is nothing new for me, but it's an old adage, and it may be new for some of you, but it's one of those situations where every time I am presented with an opportunity to say, woe is me, or complain, or find an excuse, I am going to reject that. I am going to choose to say yes. Yes to the opportunity to go do something that's going to, be a big deal and get people's attention. So I understand that there's a whole lot that fits into making these schedules go the way they go. And when you look at Georgia's schedule, which opens with Clemson, by the way, on Saturday, August 31st in the Dome, not only is it tough, it's tough in every section, especially in that middle section, where the Dogs are going to have to play Alabama coming off a bye and go on the road to play Texas at Austin. I mean, those are two Final Four teams from this season. And we all know they're not the same team next year. I get that. Doesn't matter. The programs are still the programs. The athletes are still going to be the athletes for the most part. Those are going to be two very, very difficult games. So if Georgia gets out there, they manage to win both of them, outstanding. They manage to split those games, still really good. I mean, nobody hates to lose, but if you manage to split those games, that's fine. Even if the worst scenario happens and they lose them both, that doesn't write off the rest of Georgia's season, given the new college football landscape that we're going to be in. The thing about where Georgia is right now is that Georgia and Dog Nation are in rarefied air, and we are there because of head coach Kirby Smart. When you have success the way Kirby's had success in Athens since coming back, it doesn't get rid of your problems. It just brings an entirely new basket of problems. Problems that 98% of college football do not have to mess with at all because they're not in that rarefied air. These problems that Kirby Smart and the staff are having to deal with right now. And by problems, I mean you go 12-0, you lose one game, and all of a sudden people are freaking out. You have one or two players, names that you recognize, jump into the transfer portal, and people start to lose their minds. You have a high school kid decide he might want to go play somewhere else and decommit from the program, and people think the sky is falling. None of these things are true. It very well could be that all of these things that you're seeing are merely a sign, maybe even a result of the process that Kirby Smart and his staff have implemented at the University of Georgia. They've established a process that makes Georgia great. It makes Georgia different. And not everybody is cut out to be a part of that process. When you win as much as Georgia wins, some of these moves are simply because so many people saw Georgia winning on the upslope and decided they wanted to be a part of it. Came to Athens for a year or two. For whatever reason, maybe they're not seeing the field the way they wanted to. They're still extremely talented football players. And if they see the writing on the wall, or they are maybe informed by the coaching staff that they might have a better opportunity somewhere else, these players then may decide to leave and try their game somewhere else to have more of an opportunity. So it's not that the guys that are choosing to leave are villains or awful players or anything like that. But when there's so many good players, and you literally, as Nolan Smith and Keely Ringo and all those people have tried to tell the fan base, you're literally fighting for your job every day. Maybe they're just like, man, I'm good, but I'm not that good, and I want to go play somewhere else. It happens. It's football. It's part of it in Athens, Georgia right now. It's not that way everywhere. Kirby Smart, during his time in Athens, has taken Georgia football and won like it has never won before. They have made it look easy. Now, Kirby will tell you it is not. He tells us all the time it is not. For those of us who have been around Georgia football longer than 10 years, we can verify that for you. It is not easy to win, especially not in the SEC. But when you're great at something, when you have a great program, you make it look easy. And that's not fair to the coaches necessarily. It's not fair to the players. But it is the reality for most college football fans because they look at the things like what Vegas thinks and things like that to say this should be an easy game, should be a win, should be this or that. I mean, that's one data point, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a walkover game. That's just simply not how the game works. And Kirby tries to remind us of that. But nobody wants to believe it. Doesn't change the fact, though. And regarding the transfer portal in particular, think about it this way. If you're not losing players to the portal, then odds are you're probably not winning the way Georgia is. Think about that for a second. Those teams that are not losing players at the rate Georgia's losing players or Alabama might be losing players, or pick another school that's been very, very successful, Ohio State. Those teams are not like those other teams. Teams that are not losing players are in search of players because they want to get better. Your team, the Bulldogs, are probably beating those teams most days because they have better players. It's just the reality of it. So I know it can be a little crazy and send you a little sideways and make you clutch your pearls, the red and black pearls, and worry about Georgia. But it has made my life exceedingly less stressful once I decided to understand and just give myself over to the idea that Kirby's got it under control. I'm actually working on something right now. I'm not sure when it's going to come out. If it's going to be out in the next week or two, I'm not sure when it's going to hit the best. But one of the things that's going into this new project I'm working on is the way Kirby and his staff have handled roster management during his time in Athens and what that has meant to the program. I think you can argue very, very strongly that the way they have handled those decisions is in large part the reason they have been so successful and the reason that they are where they are in college football right now, when so many other schools out there seem to be floundering around a little bit. There's a lot to be said right there. And again, I'm not going to give it all away now because honestly, it's not fully formed in my own head. And additionally, there's more than one part to that puzzle, but it is something that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. So when you think about this portal stuff, it's just good to remember the portal taketh away, but the portal also giveth. And as long as Kirby's in charge in Athens, I am not going to be overly concerned about any of the decisions that are being made around any particular player when it comes to the portal or even high school recruiting for that matter. As a Georgia fan, I am of the opinion that right now you should be absolutely thrilled with the state of football at the University of Georgia. That's like the 30,000 foot view. If you're down in the weeds, there's plenty to keep your attention, to keep you clicking on web pages, to keep you chasing YouTube videos, doing all of those things. And by all means, do it. If you need that hit of drama and adrenaline every day or every 30 minutes or whatever it is for you, please go live your life and have a good time. But even if you're going to do that, I would just say, remember what you've seen, who's guiding the ship in Athens, and don't let it be the sort of thing that's going to ruin your day, right? Just enjoy the ride. I mean, isn't that what all this is anyway? If you pay for these subscription services like I do to one or two, if you subscribe to YouTube channels like I do, if you watch videos and hear other people's opinions about things like I do, that's great, man. You want to know as much about your team as possible. But don't let it pull you down. Just know that everything's going to be A-okay in the long run. Georgia is fine. And I would venture a guess that if you're here with me on this program tonight, then you probably already understand that. Because much like Georgia, this program, my broadcast, it's not for everybody. I'm not a rip and read, shock jock, hot take kind of guy. And I'm not going to be out here over my skis professing to be some sort of film breakdown guru or anything else like that. There are people out there, and I'm not going to name names about anybody. They're doing what they're doing. I'm just saying, be careful. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt and try to remember to have a good time. And we can leave it pretty much right there. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the schedule that was leaked last week for Georgia. I'm trying to keep an eye on the schedule reveal up here on the screen as we go and monitor for any updates that I might be seeing on the various websites here. So if you see me looking away or getting distracted, that's probably, what I'm trying to do here is get some more information for you as we are doing this live. Again, we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants here. But if you look at the schedule for Georgia, when we open the season against Clemson, now the one thing I can guarantee you're going to hear from Kirby Smart once we get into spring practice even, is probably when the first question about this is going to pop up. Does it matter that you're going to open the season with Clemson like you did back in 21? Does that give your team something to shoot for, something to aim for, to prepare for? Is it going to make a difference in how your team starts the season? Are you going to be able to start faster than you did in 23? Things like this. And I guarantee you Kirby's going to say it doesn't matter who we play, because I take each opponent equally as important as any other opponent. So if you haven't heard that yet, just get ready, because it's coming. I would bet, a shiny penny on it. That's one thing for sure. But it is a fun game for us fans to look at Clemson and say, yeah, man, that's going to be a great game. Neutral site. It's going to be down here in Atlanta after the Dogs traveled up to North Carolina back in 21 to play it. And there's a lot to look at from the Clemson side there. It's going to be interesting to see what they bring to the table. And we're going to have, obviously, the entire non-active playing season to look at that game and try to dissect, rosters and who's going to be there and who's not. And then, of course, we have Tennessee Tech the next week, so a little out-of-conference game right there. And then we go on the road to Kentucky, where somebody that we all know and love, Brock Vandergriff, has now transferred into. And it could be a situation where Brock has won that job and the Dogs are going to get to play him on the road in their first conference game in 2023. So I'm looking forward to that one, if for no other reason than because of that fact. We all know what kind of player Brock is, and it's going to be very interesting if he is, in fact, the man who's taking the snaps for Kentucky when the Dogs visit the Bluegrass State at the middle part of September there. Then they're going to have that bye week, which is going to get them ready for the big matchup, one of the first major matchups on this new schedule, which is the road game at Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not only is this game on the road, which is going to be the kind of thing that Georgia fans are going to point to and say they shafted us again, but it's also going to be a night game, a primetime game kicking off at 7:30 Eastern for the world to see, and everyone will see it. They will tune in to watch that game. They will stream that game. They will be doing live streams here on YouTube as that game is going on. So that one's going to get everybody's attention, and it's going to be a lot of fun. At this point, I'm looking at the schedule. I see Clemson as a game. Again, we don't know what the rosters are, okay? But just based on the fact that we can put together some of the pieces of the puzzle, Clemson is a game that I would think Georgia's going to be favored to win, and I would expect Georgia to win that game. Tennessee Tech, obviously you would look at that and think Georgia has them outclassed, so they're going to get the win there. Going on the road at Kentucky. Now, Kentucky, again, we don't know what these rosters are going to look like, but that's a game that Georgia seems to have Kentucky's number. So let's just, for the sake of this discussion, say that Georgia's 3-0 heading into the bye and then going to play Alabama. So this middle section here is the one that is going to get everybody's attention because the road game against Alabama at night. So there's all the history, right? You can paint this any way you want to. That's a big game. Then they have to turn around and play Auburn the very next week. Now, we already know what's going on with Auburn. We know that they have bettered their roster already. We know that defense was pretty good this year, and they're not going to have wholesale changes on that side of the football. That game is going to be, a challenge for Georgia. A, because it's Auburn and it's always a challenge. B, because it's coming on the heels of what is going to be a big game physically and emotionally for Georgia the week before against Alabama. But if they manage to win those two games, they can look up right there in October and say, we are the state champions of Alabama, and move on, which would be a fantastic thing to be able to say. 10-12, they're going to go play Mississippi, or Mississippi State's going to come to Athens to play the Dogs. Now, they've got a new head coach. They're going to be figuring some things out. I would expect Georgia can get that win there. Then they have to go back on the road for that big game in Austin against another college football playoff team, the Texas Longhorns. Now, I think it's safe to say right now that Quinn Ewers is coming back, or is at least given every indication that he's going to come back for Texas. So that's going to be one of those situations where they know who's going to be throwing the football. I mean, as best I can tell. As I sit here and talk to you now, I have a pretty good idea of who's going to be throwing the football for Georgia in these games, but we don't know that for a fact. So these road games, Kentucky, Alabama, Texas, they are all going to be challenging. Ole Miss is going to be challenging because even if you have Carson Beck back, that's going to make a huge difference because he's played on the road in big games. He understands what it's all about. If it's not him, for whatever reason, whether he's gone to the pros or, knock on wood, and hopefully it doesn't happen, there's an injury issue there or whatever it is, then these games become exponentially more difficult for Georgia. You have a thing like that, a turnover at that position, an injury at that position, and it absolutely changes who you are as a football team. Doesn't mean you can't win. It just means it changes some things. It may not change things schematically, but obviously it changes things in the experience column. So any of these road games, even if Carson Beck is there, are going to be challenging. But if he's not, then obviously they become much more difficult. Then the Dogs have another bye heading into the Florida game. Florida, RIP Florida, I guess. I don't know. The way this thing looks right now, Florida is a mess. Who knows what they're going to be by the time we get to November of 24. I would like to think that Georgia is the more stable program, if nothing else, and that they're going to be able to go down there and get the win over Florida. Then they have to go on the road to Ole Miss. Now, Kirby exercised some demons this year, beating Ole Miss for the first time, the only team he had not beaten inside SEC league play. But he hadn't done it on the road. And that game against Ole Miss in his first year, I believe, I'm safe in saying, is the worst loss he has suffered at the University of Georgia. So going to Ole Miss is going to be a challenging game because of everything I just said. Plus, they're going to have players. Ole Miss is going to be considered a contender for the new 12-team playoff heading into 24. So when you look at the road schedule for the Dogs, it might be easy to point to Ole Miss and say, well, that is the lesser of the four. I mean, you could argue that. I would not. I think Ole Miss is going to be a very challenging game right there, and I think the Dogs are going to have their work cut out for them when they go down there to try to get that win. They come back home later in November, and they take on Tennessee. And Tennessee, insert your jokes here about who and what Tennessee is and has been against Georgia in recent memory. And pile on top of that, just for the sprinkles, I saw a report today that said Josh Heupel could be being considered as a new head coach for the New England Patriots. Have no idea if that's true or not, but I did see it, and I saw it from a source that made me stop and read it twice to make sure I saw it the right way. So who knows about Tennessee? But that's a game that I would expect Georgia to be able to handle. Then UMass comes in for an out-of-conference matchup. They should be outclassed. Georgia should win that football game. And then the next week, Georgia Tech, who we all know is improving under Brent Key, is going to come to Athens to round out the season for the Dogs. So, any way you look at it, this 2024 season for the University of Georgia is going to be exciting, interesting, and I, for one, can't wait to see it. Now, there's a lot of information coming at us right now. I keep glancing off to my side here to try to see what it is that's being revealed in the moment. But it's one of those situations where I'm trying to keep up with it. It is difficult. But outside of the Dogs this year, because we kind of walked through what is going on here in terms of Georgia. I mean, the possibility is absolutely on the table that Georgia could follow up this season with another season of double-digit victories. They could very easily find themselves, I don't want to say easily to diminish the games, but when you look at how it falls and how it breaks out, I think you could look at this and say they could see their way back to 10 wins And the road games, of course, would be the ones you would point to and say, you got to be careful. But the fact of the matter is, let's just say outside of the out-of-conference games against Tennessee Tech and UMass, and I just don't think Mississippi State's going to have found their way by the time the Dogs see them. Any of those other games, the potential is there that Georgia could lose them. So on one hand, Georgia you could look at them and say the baseline is 10 wins. On the opposite side, there's really only 3 games on the schedule that you might look at and say, I don't think there's any way Georgia loses those games, right? Or I don't think the possibility is there that Georgia could lose any one of those other 9 games at any point. And that's just the reality at this point. Until we know what the roster looks like, until we know a little bit more once we get into, post-spring ball and we start looking at summer workouts and fall practices and those sorts of things, there's really not much we can do as far as assessing what these teams are going to be. It's never easy in any year, and it's certainly not going to be easy heading into 2024 because there is going to be a lot of roster turnover here in 2024. So we've kind of flown through everything right there. We moved through everything at a pretty good clip. And this is one of those situations where I think we have the opportunity to sort of broaden our perspective on what this new schedule is going to afford us as fans. It's one of those things where I look at a matchup like Texas and Texas A&M, for example. That is a game that for years I paid attention to, even though they were in the Big 12 conference or another conference, just simply because it was a big rivalry game and teams, I'm a big fan of trophy games. Let me just leave it that way. So when they get out there and they have these big matchups, where there's a lot more invested in it than just a bunch of guys wearing certain colors, I get pretty fired up about it. And it's one of those things where when I look at the fact that Texas and Texas A&M are going to have the opportunity to play every year inside this conference, that gets me excited. I mean, this is a new era in SEC football, right? I mean, in every way you can imagine, we are breaking from the history that we have known for the last 30 years, and we are moving into an entirely new world. I sit here in front of you today at 47 years old, and the league broke into divisions in 1992. So while I was still in high school, okay? So this is one of those deals where everything I have known about the SEC is about to change, and that is something that excites me. Like, I am looking forward to that. Not to say that, things were getting stale the other way, but to say that the things we're getting in exchange for these changes appear to be good. I'm looking at Georgia's schedule up on the screen now, and, they're talking about how Texas is joining the league and what that's going to mean. And I don't know. I have not yet looked at everyone else's schedule. Clearly, they're just coming out tonight. But it's one of those situations where I don't know how we're actually going to split hairs and determine who has the toughest SEC schedule. I mean, how can you figure that out before the games have been played, before the rosters have been set, and so on? People are going to try to do it now. Make no mistake. I might even give it a shot myself. But it's just a shot in the dark until we know a little bit more about it. So, but Texas A&M and Texas is one of those games that I'm looking forward to seeing. And there are others. I mean, the fact that Texas is going to be in the league and a team like Arkansas is going to have an opportunity to play them. I would imagine Missouri the same for Texas and Oklahoma for that matter. I mean, it certainly has an old Big 8 feel to it. I don't know how many people in the chat or who are watching this might be able to even remember the Big 8. But there were a lot of good football teams that played in that conference years ago. And it is very interesting and in many ways comforting to me to see them come back and renew some of those older rivalries that I remember from my youth and that I am looking forward to seeing in this new look SEC. So since tonight is a little bit different, I'm going to take a second here and scroll back and take a look at the chat and see what's going on. Welcome a few of you guys in here. I see Jay's in here, 225 girls in here with us. Harry is in here with us tonight. Looks like Kirby's belt has been active. And there is Jay chiming in with a $1.99 super chat. Jay, thank you so much, friend, for that. I appreciate it. It's stuff like that that makes this possible. It gives me an opportunity to come out here and talk to you people and discuss the stuff that we love so much. I appreciate that. You know that. I just can't say it enough. And I saw Herb and Raj. They were in here earlier. Looks like they had to bail out on us, but thanks for popping by, guys. I appreciate that. And there's a lot of chat. We got chat about players in here, which is outstanding. Let's see if there's any of these we can throw up on the screen here and maybe talk about it. This one kind of sums it up for us. Harry's letting us know. I mean, the Dogs, they got a briar patch for sure. No doubt about it. I don't think there's any way that you can look at that and have a differing opinion. And Jay, it looks like he was saying very much something along the lines of what I was saying, which is that all these road games are going to be tough. Kentucky and Ole Miss will be better. Plus, we know that Texas and Bama are not easy environments. Absolutely. I don't even know how we could sit here and try to break down which of these schedules is going to be more difficult than others. I would say, based on what I think I know, and again, I haven't seen it in front of me in full yet, but I do know that Alabama's schedule doesn't look like a murderer's row. It doesn't look like Georgia's. It doesn't look like what we think Florida's is going to be. So I don't know. Again, if you are somebody who thinks that Georgia just never catches a break right there, well, there's some more ammunition for you based on what I have seen. And Kirby's belt lets us know we can lose any game at any time. I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. Like I said, there are 3 that I might take off the board as potential losses. But beyond that, I think given what we don't know right now, that is a possibility. That is the kind of thing that could happen because these other teams are trying to get better too. So it's what's going to make this next season so exciting, maybe exciting in a way that we haven't seen since we were watching that 21 team do what they did. And we weren't all yet accustomed to what that looked like, right? Maybe there were a few more nerves in 21 than there have been the last couple of seasons. I think we're going to fall back into that a little bit. I think we're going to find ourselves, instead of saying, the guys have got this one locked up, I'm only going to keep a lazy eye on it. I think all of these games for Georgia fans are going to be games that you're going to pay attention to in 2024. That's for sure. Now, here's an interesting take, and this is much like what I was saying about Texas and Texas A&M, the renewing of an old rivalry. This is the potential for a new rivalry, Texas and Alabama, because if Texas, and there's no reason they shouldn't be, a top-tier program, if they manage to get to that level and stay there, which obviously they are there this year, and if they manage to do that year over year, Alabama is going to be somebody that they're going to butt heads with a lot, and Georgia will be too, because I don't think any of us expect that Georgia's going to fall off the table anytime here soon. So these are the kind of games moving forward that I think we as SEC fans are really going to look forward to having on the slate for us. I think it's one of those things where there are probably matchups in here that we're not even considering right now. I mean, obviously, another one might be LSU and Texas, or potentially Texas A&M and Oklahoma, right? Or like I said earlier, Arkansas and Oklahoma. These are games that are going to be a lot of fun to watch, and they may not have the dogs in them at all, but they're going to be part of just what promise to be outstanding triple headers Saturday after Saturday after Saturday. Junkyard Dog joins us here this evening and says, boys and girls, we're okay going forward. We can't win the championship every year, but there's more coming our way. And I wholeheartedly agree. It's like I was saying earlier. If you're winning the way Georgia's winning, Alabama's winning, the way Texas has won this year, when you move into the future, these problems that these teams face, not everybody has to deal with. And these problems are the reason that the same team doesn't win year after year after year. Understanding that Nick Saban and Alabama have been outstanding for the last 15 years. It's hard to argue that anybody else is ever going to do that. The potential is there. We don't know what the future holds for Georgia and Kirby Smart. But to assume that if you're not at that level, you're somehow doing it wrong, I think is just a bad calculation. I said it about this time last year, right after I first started the channel. One of the things that I wanted people to understand, and I tried to talk about it in a way that would help people enjoy every football season, was that I am the kind of football fan that I mean what I say when I say I enjoy college football. I enjoy watching my team. I enjoy watching other good football teams play. I enjoy the trophy games, the rivalry matchups, all of that sort of thing. That's why if Georgia were to lose 2 games or 3 games, I can still have a really good season. I can still cheer for my team. I can still be very excited about what I saw. Do I want to win the championship every year? Absolutely. Do I believe that Georgia is one of a handful of programs across the country that are making the investments necessary to be in position to do that? Absolutely, I do. That's why I wholeheartedly agree with what Junkyard Dog said there, which is that you may not win the national championship every year, but that should not be the thing that you judge the season by. If you love the sport and you love your team, then there's a lot to be excited about and to look forward to. A lot of this is why I'm absolutely excited about watching Georgia play in the Orange Bowl. I said a lot about that last week. I know there are a lot of Dog fans who may not feel that way. I frankly cannot understand that perspective, that point of view, but you're entitled to it if you hold it. I just don't view it that way. I think that you can have 10 wins, 11 wins, major bowl game victory, and still be right where you want to be moving forward. It's not like if you don't make the Final Four teams in the current situation, that somehow you are a trash program or that you don't have a chance moving forward. Nothing could be more incorrect or short-sighted. It means that you are on a top-tier level and there just aren't that many spots available. Now, obviously, as we move into 2024, that's going to be different because now there are 12 teams that are going to have that opportunity. And it means that the way our seasons look are going to change for most teams. To think, though, that Georgia or Alabama or anybody else is going to roll their helmet out there every year moving forward and they're going to go undefeated every regular season. Remember, Georgia has gone 12-0 in 3 consecutive seasons. It's hard to argue that that's going to happen in a 12-team playoff college football. In an SEC schedule without divisions. It could. It could. But if you're expecting that, if that's the only thing that's going to make you happy as a fan, then I think that you are just setting yourself up for failure. And I choose, as I said earlier, to embrace the yes and look for the joy in the possibilities that lie ahead for Georgia football. And here's another really good point from our friend Junkyard Dog, who's letting us know that this season sets us up for 25, 26, and 27. And not only do I agree with that statement, but I would argue that isn't that always the case? Yes, to some years more than others. Some years you just have senior-laden teams. But this year is certainly not one of those years. More than half of the roster is going to be made up of underclassmen. That is just the new way of the world given the transfer portal. So you're going to have to recruit well. You're going to have to develop players. You are going to have to coach them up and game plan and coach on game day at a level that's above everybody else if you are going to consistently be in that top tier of college football. That's how Georgia got to where they are now. That's what I think is going to continue. But if you look at the things I just listed, those things are the things you can point to for any of the schools that are not in that top tier. Maybe they don't have the quality coaching staff, or maybe, the recruiting isn't at a level that allows them to have the kind of ready-to-go depth that a school like Georgia or Alabama or, say, an Ohio State may have. The defining or the deciding factors as we move forward in college football are going to change a little bit. And I think if we're paying attention, they're going to become pretty obvious, and we're going to be able to point to them, and you are going to know, is my team one of those teams in that handful that have the complete package that are not only going to get them into this expanded playoff, but make them a serious contender once they get there. Again, I every year I need to do it after the season. This season's not yet over, so I haven't done my assessment yet. But heading into the 23 season, I pegged that number at somewhere between 6 and 10 schools nationally that were making the investments, had the pieces in place, and I mean the superstructure that would give them an opportunity to actually compete for a national championship in 23. And as we look at who was in the running at the end, I was spot on. So that's just one of those things that, again, because of the portal and because of NIL and things like that, it's going to change. And I have yet to do an assessment for 24. But I suspect that the overall number is not going to change that much. I think it's going to be a situation where you're still probably only going to end up with 10. Maybe we could get really, really comfortable and loose and say 12 teams that have a chance to compete. But I don't even feel confident in doing that, because just because you make it into the 12-team tournament doesn't mean you're a serious contender to actually win it all. There is a distinction there. And it's another video for another time and another discussion. But that's the kind of thing that when I looked at the 12-team playoff was one of the things that held me back from being too overly excited about it. Because just because you get in doesn't mean that you're changing anything, really. It just means that you're in. And for the school that gets in, that's a great thing. But in terms of how it's all going to shake out in the end, I don't see that much is actually going to change. We'll see. We'll see. Again, portal, NIL, those sorts of things. We don't know how it's all going to shake out just yet. I have a feeling, but we don't know. So, when you think about what Georgia has done over the last few years, again, 12-0 in 3 consecutive regular seasons, 8-0 in 3 consecutive SEC regular seasons. Never done before. Back-to-back national champions in the college football playoff era has never been done before. And they did it at a time that is the most difficult in history to accomplish such a feat. Namely because of portal and NIL. When you add in the insane amounts of money that are generated by television revenue, the pressures of social media, all of those things, it becomes even that much more difficult. So yes, Georgia deserves a few roses thrown at their feet for what they've done the past few seasons. But nobody in this chat, nobody on this video, nobody in Athens is interested in looking backward. They're interested about tackling the future, the challenges that lie ahead, the opportunities that lie ahead. I could see it going one of two ways. Either, and understand that if you're on the internet and you're talking about college football, it's a dangerous place to be for many of us, right? Because you have an opinion and then you are just bombarded by people who, let's just say they're not nearly as invested as some of us are, but yet their opinion, is their opinion, and they are entitled to be as incorrect as they want to be. That's fine. But it's one of those things where the slings and arrows, they come at you in bunches, if you know what I mean. And I think it's going to go one of two ways. It's going to be exciting for those of us that are invested, because even the most invested among us might look at a game and say, oh, they're going to win that one. I'm going to watch, I'm going to cheer for my team, but it just doesn't have the same zing to it, the same feeling, the same butterflies in your stomach, because you're pretty confident your team's going to win. In this new age, there are going to be a lot fewer of those Saturdays, I would imagine. And again, if you're among the most invested, like I am, then that's going to be a good thing, because you're going to be excited about watching your team compete and earn, in air quotes, a victory over a good football team. Again, here's where I must say Kirby's going to tell us they're all hard to win, and they are. So let's just understand that's a given. But I think you're also going to have people that are not invested. And I'm not sure if they are going to be even more prevalent in running around cheering for their teams or having, opinions in the moment of their teams when they start to see that their squad might lose 2 games or 3 games or whatever it is and still find their way into the playoff. I'm not sure how they're going to react to that. I'm not sure if the fact they're going to lose 2 or 3 games and now these fans who just love to be front runners are not going to be around because their team's not undefeated every year. I'm not sure if that's what it's going to be, or if it's going to pull them in more and they're going to become more invested, and maybe all of college football fandom will be better for it. I understand that's a crazy optimistic viewpoint on the topic, but who's to say? It could happen. So, live schedule reveal here on the air tonight. I really wish we could have done something where we could stream it and see things being thrown up on the screen. This team's got this schedule and that sort of stuff. As a one-man band, I don't have the opportunity to do that live for you. So apologies for that, but I think you can appreciate the challenges that would present. But I did want to come on here and have that be the focus. So, yeah, it's been a whirlwind week here in the Georgia football ecosystem. But I'll leave it where we started, which is just to remind you that Georgia football is not just fine. Georgia football is fantastic. The state of the program is fantastic. Regardless of who decides to jump in the portal, regardless of who comes, regardless of who signs in this year's class and who doesn't. We all want all the players. No doubt. Count me among that group. simply not the reality in today's college football. And Georgia is just fine. The one thing that would get my attention is if I saw a headline about Kirby, which I do not expect to see, about heading to the NFL or just choosing to retire. Then I'm going to have a little bit more trepidation about what I say. But until that day comes, I'm going to look forward to seeing another one beat. Because as long as Kirby Smart is in Athens, leading the Georgia Bulldogs, well, friends, it's time once again to let the big dog eat. Thanks for being here with me. As always, you know I appreciate it. It's been fun. I'll have a lot more to say about this as we move forward. I'm sure there's going to be more breaking news changing and coming every day. And we'll talk about it and break it down, especially when it affects our Georgia Bulldogs. So until next time, take care of your friends, take care of your families, take care of yourselves. Enjoy this holiday season. And go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.